Script de video, text to continue. The papers were sitting right there on the table in front of me, not hiding, just sitting there. My hands were shaking a little as I pulled out the contract. 23 pages, my name printed at the top. Vice President of Marketing, effective immediately. Salary, benefits, stock options, everything we'd negotiated, everything I'd earned. I remember looking up from those pages, and my mom's face just changed, like she was watching something she didn't expect to see. Like the piece of paper itself was an accusation. That moment, that second, I realized that everything she'd said at dinner 2 weeks earlier wasn't just mean. It was part of something bigger. You can't actually think you did that on your own, she'd said in front of my whole family. A smile on her face. Real pleasant. Real careful. It's luck. You're not qualified for that job, honey. Everyone at the table had gone quiet. My brother James stared at his plate. My dad, who I don't see much anymore, he'd shifted in his seat like he wanted to say something but wouldn't. And Derek, my mom's boyfriend of about 8 months, he'd just watched her with this look that said, "Yeah, that's what we've been saying." I'd laughed it off that night. Uncomfortable laugh, changed the subject, pretended it didn't land. But 2 weeks later, when she saw that contract, when she saw what it actually meant, the gaslighting stopped mattering, because the contract was evidence of something else, something financial, something legal. I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old. I work as a vice president of marketing for a Fortune 500 tech company in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm here to tell you what happened when my mother tried to take control of my life in a way that almost nobody would have seen coming. If you want to know why a promotion announcement turned into a legal nightmare and how a single piece of paper made my mom freeze like a statue, keep listening. Okay, so I need to back up. Way up. My mom, Patricia, she's always been the kind of person who needed to prove something to everyone around her. 2 divorces, 3 states. She reinvented herself constantly. She was a real estate agent, then a life coach. Then she was doing wellness consulting, which I'm pretty sure meant she was drinking wine and giving advice to her friends in their kitchens. She was never happy with who she was, so she was always trying to fix who we were, especially me. My brother James, he got the full princess treatment. Straight A's, everyone knew about them. Tennis scholarship, everyone knew about that too. Mom bragged about him the way other people breathe. He was the proof that Patricia Mitchell had done something right, that she was a good mother, and I was the responsible one. There's one moment I come back to. I was 17. James had just gotten his acceptance to Duke. The house was full of people, champagne, everyone celebrating, and I'd also gotten into a really good school, University of North Carolina, on a scholarship that covered almost everything because we didn't have money like that. I remember telling my mom, and she said, "I can still hear this word for word. Oh, that's nice, honey. But that's what you do when you're smart, but not Duke smart. You take scholarships." And James, right next to her, he didn't push back. He just nodded like, "Yeah, of course that's what happens when you're not quite good enough." I was 17, and I understood that in my mother's world, I was the backup plan, the one who did things the hard way, the responsible one, which is just another word for ordinary. But here's the thing, that responsible thing, it turned into my entire life. I paid my own way through UNC. I didn't ask my parents for a dime. I worked 3 jobs sophomore year and still made Dean's List. I got an internship in marketing at 16, and by the time I graduated, I had a network and a portfolio and employers who were already competing for me. My mom watched that happen. She watched me build something real from nothing, and instead of being proud, she got quieter, more cutting, more like she was waiting for me to fail so she could say, "See, I was right." My dad, Mark, he'd left when I was 9, not dramatic, just left. He got remarried. He'd see me and James once a month, very on schedule. He paid child support. He was decent, but he wasn't a there. And because he wasn't there, Mom had all the power to shape the narrative about us, about me. She told me I was too sensitive when I cried. She told me I was too ambitious when I set goals. She told me I was ungrateful when I didn't thank her for things she'd actually done wrong. It was like she had a dial, and no matter where I pointed, she twisted it to make me sound like the problem. James learned early that the way to survive was to agree with her, to be the golden child, to make her feel good about herself by being impressive. And I learned to survive by not needing her, by being independent, by building things she couldn't take credit for, which sounds like a win. But it meant she had years of resentment building up, years of watching her kid not ask for help. Years of watching her kid not need her. Years of me proving, over and over again, that I was fine without her. By the time I was in my 20s, I barely called home. I didn't need anything. I didn't want advice. I had a therapist for that. I had friends. I had a plan. And Mom, she got mean. Not in one big explosion. In 1,000 small cuts. Comments about my weight. Jokes about my dating life. Concerned. Texts about whether I was drinking too much or working too hard. card. Everything dressed up like love, like worry, when it was actually just control. It never landed the way she wanted, though. I'd gotten good at not taking it in. But here's what I didn't know. While she was doing all that, she was also laying groundwork, building a narrative with other family members, getting James on her side about my problems. And more importantly, she was paying very close attention to my grandmother's estate. My grandmother, Alice, she had money. Not crazy money, but solid, real money. About $400,000, plus a house. She'd always been kind to me. We'd call every Sunday. She'd send me these weird little things in the mail, a funny card, a magazine article she'd saved, just checking in. And Grandma had done something my mom couldn't stand. She'd named me in her will, not just a check, not a token, a beneficiary of a trust, 50% of her estate, with the option to manage the house if I wanted to. Mom knew about this. She'd brought it up once or twice, real careful. I'm sure Grandma just wanted to make sure you'd be okay. The kind of comment that sounds nice if you're not listening. But I was listening, and I knew what it meant. So, the dinner. It was a Thursday night, June. Mom had called and said she wanted the whole family over. That meant me, James, Dad, who almost never came to these things, and Derek, her boyfriend of like 8 months. Derek was a contractor, tanned, always talking about real estate opportunities, the kind of guy who thought he could charm anyone. Mom made this whole production out of it. Flowers on the table, good wine. She'd dressed up. I remember thinking it was weird because she didn't usually do that for a regular Thursday. We got through appetizers fine, small talk. Then the main course came, and I couldn't help it. I was excited. I'd just signed the contract that morning. My boss had made it official. VP position, office with a window, a team of 8 people reporting to me. I'd been working toward this for 6 years. So I got some news today, I said. I probably should have read the room better. I probably should have known that announcing good things was dangerous. I got promoted. VP of marketing. We signed everything this morning. There was like a beat, a pause where the table went quiet. And then my mom smiled. This really specific smile. Real warm. Real mother of the year. Oh, honey, she said. That's wonderful. But let's be honest. You got lucky, right? I mean, do you really think you're qualified for a VP position? I remember the exact temperature of my face. Warm, embarrassed, angry. Actually, I am, I said. Real quiet, real steady. I've been in this role for 2 years already. I've increased our market share by 40%. You know what I mean, she said, like she was trying to help me, like I was being dense. You're smart, but this is a big job. You probably just interviewed well. Right place, right time. That's usually how these things work. Derek laughed a little. That little laugh that wasn't quite mean, but definitely agreed with her. James didn't say anything. He just cut his steak. My dad was studying his plate like it was going to tell him the meaning of life. And me? I just sat there. Because contradicting her would only make her dig in. Because explaining myself would just prove her point. That I had to justify what I'd earned. Because anything I said would be wrong. So I changed the subject. I asked Mom about Derek's new job. I let her talk about herself for the rest of the meal. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Here's the thing about families. Gossip spreads. My mom called James the next day. I didn't know it then, but he told me about it like 6 months later. She'd wanted to process what happened. She was worried about me. My promotion might be overwhelming. She was just thinking about my mental health. James, being James, he didn't push back. He probably just said, "Yeah, that makes sense, Mom." Then, and this is the part that makes me angry, she started mentioning it to people. To Grandma, indirectly. "Sarah's promotion seems very fast. I hope she's not in over her head. You know she can be impulsive." She told my Aunt Linda that she was concerned about whether I had the temperament for a leadership role. She even brought it up to Derek in a way that made him feel like he was in on it, like they were both watching me, waiting for me to mess up. And what kills me is that my team heard about it. One of my direct reports, Marcus, he's a good guy, mentioned it casually. "Hey, congrats on the promotion. Your mom must be so proud." I said something generic, and he read my face and said, "Oh, okay, family stuff." That moment taught me that my mother's narrative was now out there. It wasn't just about family anymore. It was about my professional reputation, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. The calls started coming after that. Not every day. That would have been too obvious. But like every 3 days, my mom would call, and they were always the same structure. "I'm just checking on you. I want to make sure you're not stressed. I'm worried you're taking on too much. You know, when you were little, you always pushed yourself too hard." And the implied message was always, "You're going to fail, and I told you so." I'd try to tell her about wins. "We just closed a partnership with a major distribution channel." And she'd say, "That's good. I hope the partnership was the one doing the work, though. You wouldn't want to overcommit." I'd mention my team was growing. "Oh, wow. That's a lot of people to manage. You're going to have to be careful with that." It was death by 1,000 cuts. And the worst part? It was all plausible deniability. If I said, "Mom, you're not being supportive," she'd act hurt. "I'm trying to help you. I'm worried." Is it wrong to worry about my daughter? No, it's not wrong. But this wasn't worry. This was a campaign. Then James got involved. He called me on a Saturday morning, real casual. "Hey, so Mom's worried about you. I'm worried about you too. Maybe you should talk to someone?" I asked him what he was worried about specifically. "I don't know. You seem different. Like stressed. Like maybe you're not handling this well." And I realized my mother had coached judged him. She'd framed my success as a mental health crisis. She'd made him think I was falling apart. James, I'm fine. I'm actually really happy. This is a good thing. Yeah, but Mom says that's where I stopped listening. Because my mother had successfully turned my brother into her spy, into her proof. Whatever I said, he would report back. Whatever I felt, she would interpret differently. The isolation was intentional. I just didn't understand why yet. 3 weeks after the dinner, my mom asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. She'd missed me. I should have said no, but I kept hoping that maybe she'd had a moment of clarity, that maybe she was ready to actually be proud of me. We sat at a coffee place near my work. She got a latte. I got coffee black. And then she spent 45 minutes telling me how my childhood had made me afraid of intimacy, how my success obsession was a defense mechanism, how she was worried I was going to end up alone. She cried a little, said she was just trying to help me be whole, and I realized this woman genuinely believed that my confidence was pathology, that my independence was trauma, that there was something wrong with me for not needing her approval. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about the promotion anymore. This was about control. This was about making sure I stayed tied to her, dependent on her narrative, unable to trust my own judgment. And the scariest part, I almost started believing her, but then something happened that made everything clear. It was the lawyer's call. Before the lawyer called, though, the campaign got wider. Mom started telling people I was irresponsible, not in a big way, in careful, concerned ways. She'd mentioned to Aunt Linda that I wasn't really prepared to handle this level of responsibility, but she'd say it like she was defending me, like she was making excuses. She told my grandmother's friend Carol that I might have some judgment issues, but framed it like she'd read it in an article about ambitious young people. She even started suggesting to Derek, who then obviously told everyone, that I might be having manic episodes. That's a direct quote, by the way. Derek mentioned it to a friend of his who knew someone who knew me, and it got back to me like a game of broken telephone. The narrative was crystallizing. Sarah's promotion isn't a win. Sarah's having a mental health crisis. Sarah's irresponsible. Sarah can't be trusted. And you know what the worst part was? No one was asking me if any of it was true. Derek had become a lot more present in my mom's life by this point, and I started noticing something. He was amplifying everything she said. At one point, I ran into them at a grocery store. I was buying groceries. Normal Tuesday. Derek made this comment about how I must be working really hard to keep up the appearance of success. The appearance, not the actual success. The appearance. He'd started showing up to family dinners more often. He'd interject into conversations. He'd give my mom these looks that said, "Yeah, that's right. Keep going." I realized later, and a therapist confirmed this, that Derek was being used as a validator. He made my mother's criticism sound like an outside observation. He made her narrative more credible. They were a team. And then, about 7 weeks after the dinner, my mom started bringing up money. She called me and said, "Your grandma's getting older. We should probably talk about what happens if something happens to her." Innocent sounding. Practical. But then she said something weird. "I'm actually pretty close with Grandma right now. She's been leaning on me a lot. So if anything happened, I'd probably be the one handling her affairs." She said it like she was telling me something important, like I should understand the implication. A few days later, she mentioned that Grandma's lawyer had been talking about updating some documents. She suggested that maybe I should call Grandma and find out what's going on, because Grandma might need guidance. And then, this is the part that makes my blood still run cold. She said, "You know, some people get inheritances and then blow through them in like 5 years. I'd hate to see that happen to you. Maybe it would be good if there was someone who understood finances watching over things. Someone who understood finances. Someone like her." She was building a case. She was planting the idea that I needed her to help manage my grandmother's money, that I was irresponsible with finances, that I couldn't be trusted. And she was positioning herself as the person who would protect me from myself. Then the lawyer called. Her name was Catherine. She was my grandmother's estate attorney. And she said something like, "Hi, Sarah. I wanted to reach out because there's been some activity on your grandmother's trust that I need to clarify with you directly." I felt my stomach drop. Catherine explained that my grandmother had set up a trust years ago. 50% of her assets in the house would go to me. 40% would go to my Aunt Patricia. Sorry, I realize I haven't mentioned that. My mom's name is Patricia, and so is my aunt. Same generation. Anyway, Aunt Patricia gets 40%. 10% goes to various charities. But here's the thing. The trust had a trustee, the person who manages it while Grandma's alive and handles distribution when she passes. And my mother had called Catherine's office twice, asking to be named as trustee instead of the current trustee, who was my Uncle Richard. Catherine said she wanted to discuss updating your grandmother's wishes, but your grandmother never called me and asked for that. She never requested a change. Only your mother did. Oh no. Has anyone else contacted you about the trust? I asked Catherine. There was a pause. Actually, yes, she said. Your mother's mentioned several times that she's concerned about your ability to manage finances. She suggested that perhaps a guardian or someone with financial expertise should be overseeing things, and she mentioned something about you possibly having some challenges with impulse control. My mother had been calling my grandmother's lawyer and telling her I was financially irresponsible. She'd been building a legal case against me while simultaneously trying to position herself as the protective trustee, and the goal was clear. If she became trustee, she would have control over $400,000 while my grandmother was still alive. She could advise Grandma. She could shape decisions. She could make sure money went where she wanted. And when Grandma died, she'd control the distribution. She could contest my half of the inheritance. She could create legal complications that would take years to sort out. She could position herself as the victim, the one who had to take over because I was too unstable. This wasn't about me getting promoted. This had never been about the promotion. This was about money and control, and my mother's desperate need to prove that she was right about me all along. I hung up with Catherine and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Everything clicked into place. The dinner announcement, the gaslighting calls, the narrative about my mental health, the hints about my financial irresponsibility, even Derek's little comments about appearances. It was all coordinated. It was all building towards something. My mom had looked at my promotion and realized I was becoming independent, truly independent, and that terrified her, because if I didn't need her, she lost her leverage. So she decided to make sure I did need her by controlling the one thing I couldn't ignore, my grandmother's money. I went home that day and pulled out all my files, tax returns, bank statements, investment records, proof of every single dollar I'd earned and managed and built. And then I called a lawyer of my own. The next day, I got my promotion contract signed by my company printed out, all 23 pages. I laid it on my desk and I just looked at it for a while. This piece of paper meant I was succeeding without her, that I'd earned this by myself, that all her narratives about my incompetence were lies, and I decided I was done defending myself. I was going to let the evidence speak. My lawyer was named Tom. He was expensive and direct, and he didn't have patience for nonsense. When I told him the story, the dinner, the gaslighting, the phone calls to my grandmother's lawyer, the attempt to become trustee, he listened quietly and then said, "Your mother has committed no crime so far, but she's engaged in a pattern of behavior designed to establish a false narrative. And if she becomes trustee, she has legal grounds to make decisions that would directly harm your inheritance. We need to intervene before that happens." He called Catherine and told her that I was retaining counsel. Catherine said she'd already planned to reach out to my grandmother because the whole situation was irregular. Grandma had no idea. My mother had been calling about trusteeship. Then Tom set up a meeting with my grandmother's lawyer, my mother, Derek, who'd somehow become my mom's advisor for this, and me. It was set for a Tuesday afternoon at Catherine's office. My mom didn't know I was bringing a lawyer. She thought it was just a family meeting to clear things up. I remember walking into that conference room. My mom was already there, sitting across from Catherine's desk. Derek was next to her. He was wearing what looked like a business shirt, like he was trying to look official. My mom's face when she saw me shift slightly. She'd expected this to be soft, family, emotional. My lawyer, Tom, pulled out a chair for me. Formal, professional. Catherine was at her desk with my grandmother's file open. A contract was sitting right there. That contract, the one that named the trustee. "Patricia," Catherine started, real careful, "I need to ask you directly. Why have you been calling my office requesting to become trustee of your mother's estate when your mother has not asked me to make any changes?" My mom's face did this thing. It flushed and went pale at the same time. "I'm just trying to protect Sarah," she said. "I'm concerned about her judgment. I thought I could help." "That's not how trusts work," Catherine said, and it was like watching someone realize they've been caught. "A trustee has legal fiduciary responsibility. The beneficiary cannot be changed because a third party is concerned, and the current trustee can only be changed if the grantor, your mother, Alice, requests it." "But," my mom started, and that's when Tom placed something on the table. A stack of emails and voicemails between my mom and Catherine's office. Transcripts of calls where my mom had suggested I was irresponsible, possibly manic, that I might need a guardian. There was a voicemail, which still gets me, where she'd left a message saying, "I'm just trying to make sure Sarah's future is protected. She's not like James. She doesn't always make good decisions. I want to be really clear about something," Tom said, and his voice was calm and professional and absolutely devastating. "Your client attempted to establish a legal case that her daughter is mentally unfit to manage an inheritance. She did this without the knowledge of her mother, the actual grantor of the trust, and she did this in a clear attempt to position herself as trustee, giving her access to and control over $400,000. Derek shifted in his seat. My mom's hand actually shook. "That's not, I wasn't," my mom started. The voicemail to your mother, Catherine cut in, where you say you want to protect your daughter's future. When did you leave that? I don't remember, my mom said quietly. It was 3 weeks ago, a week after your promotion dinner where you publicly told your daughter that her professional achievement was due to luck. And that's when I realized Catherine had done her homework. She'd figured out the timeline. She'd understood what was happening. I think, Tom said, that it's time for a reset. Patricia, your mother has requested that the trustee remain unchanged. She's also authorized me to tell you that if you continue attempting to influence the terms of her trust or the distribution of her assets, she will take legal action for fraud and elder abuse. My mom actually went white. You will sign an agreement that you will not contact the trust attorney again regarding these matters. You will sign an agreement that you will not attempt to influence your mother's decisions about her estate, and you will sign an agreement that includes specific boundaries regarding your interaction with your daughter. Derek tried to say something. Tom looked at him and said, "And who are you, exactly?" Derek didn't answer, just kind of shrank. My mom looked at me, and I just looked back. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say, "I told you so," and I just sat there, composed and legal and absolutely untouchable, and I watched her realize she had lost. Over the next week, Tom collected everything. The emails between my mom and Catherine's office, the voicemails, the transcripts of calls where she'd mentioned my instability. But then there was more. Tom had contacted James, and James, bless him, he felt guilty. He forwarded me a text chain where my mom had specifically coached him on what to say to me. Just mention that you're worried about her mental health. Don't be specific. Just keep planting the seed. There were texts from Derek to my mom where he was coaching her back. You need to make people think she's not stable. That'll make it easier to argue for guardianship. Guardianship, not trusteeship. Guardianship, as if I were a child. There were emails from my mom to Aunt Linda where she flat out said, "I'm going to establish that Sarah needs help managing her life so that when mother passes, I can make sure Sarah doesn't mess up the inheritance." It wasn't implied anymore. It was written out, explicit, a campaign, a strategy, a plan. Tom sat down with me one afternoon and he basically said, "Your mother has engaged in a coordinated pattern of emotional abuse with the goal of legal financial exploitation. The documentation is overwhelming." He also said something I'll never forget. "What she did isn't illegal enough to be criminal, but it's unethical enough that she knows she's wrong. She's just hoping you'll eventually give up fighting and let her have what she wants." He recommended we file a cease and desist, a formal legal document saying my mother is not to contact me except through counsel. He also recommended I file a police report, not for prosecution but for documentation. So there's an official record of her behavior, and he recommended I speak with my grandmother's lawyer about pressing elder abuse charges, because what she'd done, repeatedly contacting the attorney, making false claims about my grandmother's daughter, trying to manipulate access to the trust, that crosses into illegal territory. I didn't file charges, but the threat of it was real, and everyone knew it. Then Catherine called me. "We found something else," she said. "When we went back through your grandmother's file, we found a document that was never official. Your mother had apparently drafted an amendment to the trust. It would have changed the terms to name her as trustee, changed the distribution ratios, and added language about your financial incompetence. Did Grandma sign it?" I asked. "No," Catherine said, "but your mother's signature is on it, and we believe she was planning to get your grandmother to sign it at some point." "That's forgery," Tom said when I called him. "That's falsifying a legal document. That's a felony." My mother had forged a trust amendment. She'd created a false legal document. She'd been preparing to present it to my grandmother as if it were legitimate. Catherine also pulled bank records. My mother, as a secondary account holder on my grandmother's checking account, something that made sense for helping with bills, had accessed the account multiple times in the past 6 months. Not to pay bills, to review the balance. She'd been tracking how much money was there. She'd been planning when she'd make her move. And the voicemail to Grandma, the one where she said she wanted to protect Sarah's future, it was her laying groundwork. It was her establishing in my grandmother's mind that I was the problem, that she was the solution. Tom called the police, not to press charges immediately, but to file a formal report. Elder abuse, fraud, attempted forgery, unauthorized account access. The police opened a case, and suddenly, my mother wasn't just a concerned family member. She was a person under investigation. Derek, when he realized the severity of the situation, basically evaporated. He stopped coming to family events. He stopped texting my mom. He'd realized she was not worth whatever he thought he was getting out of the situation. James called me and apologized. He said my mom had manipulated him, and he should have questioned her sooner. He said he wanted to have a real relationship with me going forward, not the one my mother had scripted. And my grandmother, she was furious and heartbroken because she'd raised my mother. She'd taught her better, and watching her daughter try to steal and manipulate to get what she wanted, that broke something in Grandma. The investigation took 4 months. The resolution came down to a negotiation. My lawyer and my grandmother's lawyer negotiated with my mother's new attorney because, once it became legal, she got her own lawyer. The deal was this: my mother would sign a formal boundary agreement. No contact with me except through legal counsel. No discussing my personal life, my career, my finances, or my mental health with anyone. Violation would result in immediate legal action. She would withdraw any and all claims to be trustee or executor of my grandmother's estate. She would sign a statement acknowledging that the amendment document she drafted was not authorized and would be destroyed. She would reimburse my grandmother's legal fees related to the trust review, and she would write a letter of apology, not to read to me, not to post publicly, just to write, witnessed by her lawyer, saying what she did and that it was wrong. The police investigation was suspended pending her compliance with the agreement. If she violated any part of it, they'd move forward with prosecution. She signed on a Thursday afternoon in her lawyer's office, without meeting my eyes. My grandmother's trust was transferred to Uncle Richard. He's solid. He understands fiduciary responsibility. He's gonna make sure that money is distributed the way Grandma wants. And Grandma called me after. She cried a little. She said, "I'm so sorry my daughter is the way she is, and I'm so proud of you for not letting her define you." That mattered more than any legal victory. James and I have been slowly rebuilding. It's not the same as it was, but it's real now instead of scripted. He got some therapy too. He realized how much he'd been complicit in my mother's narrative just by not pushing back. My team at work, they witnessed me handling an insanely complex personal situation with clarity and boundaries. My credibility went up. My promotion is solid. My team respects me. My company trusts me. And my mother? She sent me one message early on saying, "I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed our family." And I didn't respond because there was nothing to respond to. She couldn't hurt me anymore because I was no longer willing to accept her narrative about who I am. 3 months later, I'm in a really different place. I still have a therapist, but now it's about moving forward instead of defending myself. I'm sleeping better. I've started dating someone who's kind and actually supportive. My team threw me a little celebration dinner for hitting our quarterly targets, and for the first time in my life, someone achieving something didn't feel like it was setting up a narrative that would be used against them. My grandmother and I have lunch every other Sunday now. We don't talk about my mom much. Mostly we just catch up. She tells me about the garden she's planting. I tell her about work. It's simple and good. And I've learned something that I wish I'd known years ago. Boundaries aren't mean. Setting them isn't cruel. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. My mother tried to control my life by controlling the narrative about who I am. And the only reason she had power was because I kept hoping that if I just explained myself enough, if I just proved myself enough, she'd finally see me. But that's not how it works. Some people will never see you the way you deserve to be seen. And the moment you stop needing them to, you're free. I didn't win because I screamed louder. I didn't win because I exposed her publicly. I won because I had documentation. I had evidence. I had an attorney. And most importantly, I had clarity about what I would and would not accept. Here's what I want you to understand. If you're in a situation where someone in your family is trying to control the narrative about who you are, you don't have to fight them with emotion. You fight them with evidence. You fight them with boundaries. You fight them by making sure that everything you do, every achievement, every success is so clearly yours that no one can steal it. And if someone tells you that your success is luck, that your competence is questionable, that you need them to manage your life, you don't have to convince them otherwise. You have to show everyone else the truth through actions, through documentation, through the life you build that doesn't depend on their approval. My mom looked at that contract and froze because she realized, finally, that I didn't need her permission to exist, that nothing she said about me could change what I'd accomplished, that I was going to be fine without her, and that terrified her. Don't let anyone keep you small because your freedom threatens their control. If you've experienced something like this, a family member trying to manage you, diminish you, or control your life, I want to hear your story in the comments. What did you do? How did you break free? And if you're thinking about it, if you're trapped in a situation like this right now, reach out to a lawyer, reach out to a therapist, build your documentation, and know that you're going to be okay. Thank you for listening.